Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to be here to share our new Business Break series with you. This presentation is the first in the series, and the Business Break series is going to be co-led by myself, Tamara Carasa, and Tess Layton, my colleague. And we're going to have a rotating cast of lawyers join us to speak about various topics that are important to and will be important to businesses as they go through the life of their business. This series is designed so that it'll provide some practical legal information about carrying on business in Alberta. And these complimentary on-demand webinars are short and sweet, 15 minutes or less, and will provide some general business advice on questions that we frequently hear from our clients and topics that we think are relevant to Alberta businesses now. COVID-19 has highlighted that many businesses are unaware of where they can turn when they need some guidance, and we're hoping that this will be a jumping off point for those businesses, something they can turn to perhaps point them in the right direction. While these presentations will assist your business in navigating legal issues during COVID-19, the Business Break series is going to explore legal topics that your business may need to consider at any point in time. We're always open to suggestions, so if you have a business-related topic that you'd like to know more about, please let us know and we'll see if we can add it to our presentation roster. You can expect to see a Business Break installment come out over the coming weeks, and the next installments are going to include sessions on annual corporate obligations, business loans, commercial leases, and what to do when you need to exit a business. Today, we're going to talk about some of the immediate implications of COVID in the business realm. While we discuss some of the most important changes to your legal obligations and options which are in force during the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now that Alberta's relaunch strategy is in full force and we expect to hear about stage 2 businesses reopening real soon, we hope that this seminar will be timely and will provide you with a bit of knowledge to get that process going. Most importantly, Today we're going to show you where you can find additional resources that we've developed by our firm, and to point you to some of the resources that the government has released for businesses specifically as a result of COVID-19. So as I mentioned, today we're going to look at some of the legal information that businesses should be aware of when they're navigating COVID-19. In particular, we're going to look at filing deadlines both for taxes and corporate registries, a Limitations Act suspension, what's happened as a result of the court closures, and Alberta's relaunch strategy implications for employers. It's important to note that these are not all of the legislative changes that have been enacted since the onset of the pandemic, but these are some of the ones that we think are most universally applicable to Alberta businesses. By now, you probably are aware that your individual tax filing deadlines were deferred to June 1st, with any payments being deferred to after August 31st. There's also a deferral for businesses as well. Any tax amounts or any tax installment payments that become due between March 28th and August 31st are deferred until after August 31st. It's important to note that there's no change to GST or HST filing deadlines and amounts owing, and as well as the payment of source deductions that are withheld and the employer's contribution. Those still need to be paid within the same timelines that you've been paying them. If your corporation's anniversary is coming up, you might be wondering how you'll hold an annual directors and shareholders meeting, how you'll file your annual return. In keeping with public gathering restrictions, deadlines are suspended for corporations, partnerships, cooperatives, and nonprofit organizations to hold annual general meetings and file their annual returns at a later date. If our firm assists you with maintaining your corporate minute book, we'll continue to prepare the necessary documentations for you during COVID-19 and for your annual returns. And these documents can be filed by our corporate department electronically. In addition, we have tools within our office that we can sign those to you or send those to you electronically in order that they can be signed and sent back to us by electronic means. If you do determine that you'd like to proceed with your annual general meetings or any board meetings during COVID-19, you're going to want to look at your bylaws to see if they specifically permit the holding of meetings remotely, which could include by telephone, video conference, or even voting by email. If your bylaws do not promote remote meetings, you're going to need to have the consent of all shareholders or members or directors to hold a meeting in this manner. The attendance of a shareholder or a director at a meeting is deemed to be consent unless they are attending solely to object to the holding of the meeting in that manner.
So if your business is contemplating litigation, you may be wondering how your claim might be impacted during the court closure or during the COVID pandemic generally. Similarly, if your business is currently involved in litigation, you might be wondering if that case is going to progress during COVID and if you can see any resolution of your claims during the course of the pandemic. Well, in true legal fashion, the answer is maybe. On March 30th, 2020, the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General issued a ministerial order to suspend limitation periods and any period of time within which any step must be taken in any proceeding or intended proceeding. So of course, this would include the rules of court. This would include any obligation to commence or to continue an action, including to file a statement of claim and a statement of defense. Of course, there are other steps in litigation that have time periods connected to them. So it might be helpful to reach out to your lawyer or look at the step that you're at in your litigation to determine whether or not it's applicable to you. The ministerial order was made retroactive to March 17th, 2020, and continues until June 1, 2020, which of course recently passed. We have had a brief pause in litigation, but the limitation periods and time periods affected by the ministerial order now resumed running. Now that the limitations, deadlines, and time periods prescribed by the rules of court are back in full force, you must adhere to the statutory deadlines for filing documents and advancing your litigation. Practically speaking, though, courts are still experiencing very limited operations, and in many cases, it can be difficult to schedule a hearing in the normal course. Of course, as I mentioned, courts are limited in their operations right now due to COVID, due to social distancing, and of course, personal hygiene requirements. The courthouses in Alberta have actually remained open. However, access is restricted to lawyers, their clients, and other essential participants to the litigation process. The provincial court, or small claims court, as it's commonly known, has been hearing matters over telephone and on a video conference platform known as WebEx throughout the entire course of the pandemic, as has the Alberta Court of Appeal. The Court of Queen's Bench has recently announced that beginning on June 1st, 2020, it will hold virtual chambers via WebEx and will allow electronic filing of applications to be decided by a judge in writing, and will schedule some matters in person if those matters are emergency or urgent matters. So it's important to emphasize here that at the beginning of this pandemic, we were only allowed to get before the court if the matter was urgent or an emergency. Now the court has opened additional platforms to allow litigants to get into court and have their routine matters heard, sometimes in writing or on telephone or via WebEx video conferencing. So recently, the government of Alberta also announced that the Alberta relaunch strategy would be implemented. And of course, there's very significant implications for employers. As we know, and we've all been experiencing in Alberta, we have a staged or phased relaunch approach. As of the time of this webinar, we are in phase 1, and we will be moving to stage 2 quickly. So the Alberta government has provided some really useful and helpful guidance here. The government website, which we've listed here on the PowerPoint, has a lot of information for businesses, but the salient point is that employers should develop and implement policies and procedures to mitigate the transmission of COVID-19. Businesses are being asked to implement daily screening measures for workers and visitors for symptoms of COVID-19, and are also required to facilitate social distancing measures where appropriate in the workplace for that particular industry, and to implement increased hygiene measures to reduce the spread of COVID-19. If anyone has attended or watched our firm's previous webinars that the employment group has been giving, we've had a couple that deal specifically with Alberta's relaunch strategy and the back to work implications for businesses. Matt Woodley and Anthony Purgis have provided a very informative session on back to work guidelines. And if you'd like to view that recorded webinar, We'd invite you to head to our website at www.rmrf.com/news, where you can find that webinar and a number of other webinars that are useful to businesses and employers generally.
As Tess mentioned, our website contains a number of resources, both in printed and webinar form, that may be helpful for your business on the topics of commercial leases, electronic signatures, force majeure clauses in contracts, and others that may help you to navigate both COVID and running a business generally. We also have published a blog post on some of the government programs that businesses can access to help navigate COVID. Watch for an upcoming webinar series entitled Navigating Uncertain Times, which will include practical tips and information on topics including commercial real estate, managing cash flow and financial red flags, and bankruptcy and insolvency tips and processes for creditors. We know that there's a lot of information out there about the changes to the business landscape in response to COVID-19, which can be difficult to navigate and determine what is appropriate and applicable to your business. Our lawyers here at Reynolds Mirth have been hard at work developing lots of content relevant to keeping your business informed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we encourage you to visit the news section of our firm website at www.rmrf.com/news so that you can learn about the legal topics that might be most helpful for your business. We also hope that you'll join us in our upcoming business break webinars on annual corporate obligations, business loans, commercial leases, and exiting a business. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for tuning in.